So, welcome everyone to another episode of What's the Day? And if you're wondering what today could be about, I directly just moved to tell you that today is commemorated as the International Day of Banks. And I'm today joined by Brian Pillmore. He's the founder and CEO of Visbanking, which is a pioneer data-driven banking platform founded in 2020 that provides visualized information such as metrics, performance, and regulations on the banks in the US for consumers and stakeholders to make informed analysis and decisions. It's wonderful to have you with me, Brian, today. I'm honored to be talking to people across the world. This podcast is giving me that opportunity. Before I move to the day itself, do you want to introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, thanks so much, Aditya. Appreciate it, and great to join you here on the International Day of Banks. And Brian here. I'm joining you from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, which is smack dab in the middle of the United States. And I always tell people that in the United States, or in Oklahoma, we have 3 million people, but we have 5 million cows. So it's not a very big. It's a big geographical state, but not a big place. And live here and lead a software business, a startup called Visbanking, as you mentioned. And it's really a critical time in the banking industry with a lot of concerns around liquidity and solvency.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. I'll now probably move to the day itself, just to give the people listening a little idea about what the day itself is. So on 19 December 2019, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution 74/245, and they designated 4th of December as the International Day of Banks. This was done in recognition of the significant potential of I'm quoting this from the website itself. So this was done in recognition of the significant potential of multilateral development of banks and other international development banks in financing sustainable development, providing know-how, and also in recognition of the important role that the banking systems in every UN member state is contributing to the improvement of the standard of living. So Brian, probably you could say, tell us from your experience how it's been in the banking industry. Why, even in Oklahoma, let's say how the rotation of
super old industry, right? I mean, banking. I've been in many museums and seen some interesting pieces. I was in a museum in what is modern day Turkey, looking at ancient Hittite contracts that were focused on basically purchase and sale and lending on the value of grain. And so banking, and I say that very broadly, banking has been around forever. And the ability to trade money or move money from place to place is really important to civilization. And banking itself, I think the UN is recognizing what has, been the case for many millennia, that banking allows people to store wealth, and also it allows for the efficient transfer of wealth, which I think is so important to civilization. I'll say my own experience in banking is really an interesting one, because I'm not a banker. I was not the guy that came out of school and went to work at a bank. Yeah. I actually was an engineer, and I worked as developing software and hardware for a really large international company, GE.
Right.
And what was fascinating is during the 2008 financial crisis, I was asked at GE to go and help a few other team members start a bank in the middle of the crisis. And there's nothing like a battlefield promotion to teach you about the industry. And so I didn't, other than having a bank account myself and having one credit card, I didn't know what banks did. And so I very quickly learned. And I think it's helpful for anyone, from any background, to learn how a bank works and how a bank can work for them.
Since you mentioned the financial crisis of 2008, and starting a bank itself in the middle of the whole meltdown, and probably the economy is going through something similar these days, although not the whole meltdown itself, but the development that came through after that, what re-emerged in the economy from banks could have been something that we should learn from, and how that struggle was real.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we learned that we need to be conscious of interconnectedness in a global world. We have to be conscious of where things are interconnected and what happens if one thing fails, what happens to something else. That's a timeless lesson. Secondly, when we lend money, we need to be more conservative in our underwriting of the person or company we're lending money to. We have to understand two things. One, their ability to pay us back. Yeah. And secondly, their willingness to pay us back. And those are very fundamental things in banking. And then I would say that today, what I look at is the interconnectedness is really just as important. But what we're going through today in the United States and to a lesser extent, I think the United States has some real fundamental issues in banking right now, driven by very short-term changes in interest rate policy that shocked the system. But interconnectedness is still key, but we're also looking at capital, and not just capital on its own, but capital combined with liquidity, that is the ability to meet your near-term obligations. That's right. And secondly, insolvency. So that is whether you have a positive net worth, like are my assets greater than my liabilities, which actually gets back to capital.
So talking about capital and then how we need to lend money to the right person, we need to move to the future, right? So let's, when I take it back to the day, let's take a step back to the previous year, okay? In 2022, what the theme for the day was shaping the future of banking. Now, this was done with the United Nations Environment Program, and it has a finance initiative. So it's working with the banking community using the UN principles of responsible banking. Now, these has 300 signatories, which basically are banking companies, which is more than 50% of the industry itself. Now, it's helping banks align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, international agreements like the Paris Climate, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to lending itself, let's say, if you are working for, say, your company itself, you're doing data analysis and helping consumers take decisions, right? So if there's a project that's specifically for, say, a sustainable development goal or something like that, are the considerations different when you make decisions? Because obviously there is the profitability that needs to be taken care of when you are lending to someone. But then if the objective is a little philanthropic, does it change the decision-making process?
Yeah, I think getting sustainability goals ahead of the fundamentals of the lending is putting the cart before the horse. So many of the sustainability goals are very good and very noble.
Right.
But if we put them ahead of the fundamentals, back to those fundamentals before, who are the people? What are they doing? Right. Are they good at it? Do they have the ability to repay us? What is the money that we're lending them going to be used for? Does it make sense? Those are all the right underwriting questions.
That's correct.
Right? That's the horse. That's what's going to get you there. The cart that comes along with the horse are the sustainability goals. Okay, is this good for the environment, or does it pollute everything under the sun? Is this project going to be using child labor? or is it are the workers going to be properly vetted and in line with child labor laws? Or pick your sustainability initiative, whatever it is, right? It's all good. Many noble aims. But if we put the cart before the horse, let's not call it banking. Let's just call it charity.
Right. That would say, I mean, that's a good way to put it. Because even when I did my MBA, we were still talking about profitability first, and then even if it's you're lending money to someone, you always have to get it back, or else there's no point lending, right?
And in banking and lending, it's not always the case with some of these development banks that the United Nations is working with. But in banking, like in the banks that I work with, now I don't work with many development banks in developing nations, but in most banks, every dollar you lend out, all of it is other people's money.
That's right. Yes.
Around 90% of it is depositors' dollars.
Correct.
The other 10% of it, give or take, is investor dollars. It's all other people's money that you're giving to someone else. So one of the best credit officers I worked with, he said, Brian, we have to get every decision right because we're giving out other people's money.
That's right. Yeah. So have you ever had an interaction with someone in a development bank per se? How is their philosophy different, if you could shed some light on it?
I don't have a lot of experience there. I have my brother. Yeah, it's kind of a weird relationship, but my brother-in-law's uncle actually works in development banks in some developing nations, but I haven't had any interactions that are significant enough to be worth talking about. Definitely not my expertise.
Okay. So yeah, probably not the direction that we could go into. So let's talk about your your company itself. So what's something that people can look forward to when they try to interact with your company per se, or something of that sort?
Yeah, so our company takes a lot of publicly available information and makes it available to any subscriber on our platform in a way that can be visualized. And what is our focus? Our focus is on the 4,800 banks in the United States and around the 5,000 credit unions.
Right.
And these are all in the United States. And I think this is a key differentiator between developing nations and developed nations, is the transparency in the flow of information.
Okay.
In developing nations, either due to the lack of infrastructure or due to their interest in keeping things
hidden per se,
undisclosed,
there's
a lack of available information. And I was working with a client over the weekend on Saturday, and he specifically said, Brian, the United States, he happened to be based in Turkey. He was blown away. He said, Brian, the United States has so much information. It's crazy how much data we have. And I think that's a real differentiating factor for developing countries versus developed, and a real area that needs to be changed when developing nations go and become more developed. They have to bring more transparency. And I think it's actually what some development banks are doing and driving.
This is probably a question a little different, of course. So in India here, we've got a new payment interface. It's called the United Payments Interface, the UPI, which is basically helping people use their mobile phones directly. They don't need to have a plastic card per se, just need an account number. And you can use a QR code to, more like having an email ID that is directly connected to your the account number itself, so you can directly transfer money across. But as far as I know, there has been some resistance to the application of this interface when it comes to countries, especially Western countries, even in the US. Do you see any reason for that?
Yeah, I think user adoption is really difficult for anything that's new in the financial system.
Mhm.
Number one, you have to gain trust.
Mhm.
Number two, you have to gain some amount of scale. And when I say scale, I don't just mean that you need to be bigger, but you actually have to be interconnected. So I'll give an example that's personal to me. We have a number of different peer-to-peer payment systems in the US. Some of their names are like the Cash App or Zelle, or so we have all these peer-to-peer systems, and there's many of them. And many of them are low or no cost. So, it doesn't cost anything to install the app on your phone. It doesn't cost anything in many cases to send money to a friend. It's very low cost or no cost.
Yeah.
So why do I not have many of them on my phone? Well, probably because I don't have as many friends. I don't know. But the reality is I just don't adopt them. My wife, on the other hand, she has them all and she can send money to her friends, and she does. Right?
If I can interrupt, let me just give a brief explanation of the UPI system itself. It's not like an app in itself. It's a platform on which other apps are built. So if you say Cash App or PayPal, they're using the system, the platform to transfer money. Okay. Yeah. So it's like having an Amex. While Amex can give cards to different banks for the banks to use the platform. So it's like that. So, and that has scaled to the whole country in itself. And it's no cost, literally no cost cash transfer on an instantaneous basis. So, I mean, from a personal perspective, I see that probably some platforms could be resisting because there's no transaction fees involved in this? Or is it just that the resistance in the financial system that happens?
Yeah, my guess is, I don't know precisely the dynamics in India. But my guess is, and from some of the data I've seen, but I'm not an expert, is that the cash economy is real. Yeah. And whenever governments have very onerous requirements for taxation or for regulatory filing, individuals that are seeking freedom, they're seeking freedom from the government's interference in their business. They're seeking freedom economically in a constrained environment. Like, I think one of the most underlying things that we have inside of us is a desire for freedom.
Right.
And we want the money that we work so hard for, we want to keep it. And the money that we're using to buy something else, we don't want anything to be taken out of that. Right. And so while the low friction payment platform that all of these apps can connect to is great, but a resistance to use it is because so much of the economy is based on cash, and there's a lot of economic activity that's occurring that's not reported or taxed.
Okay. So probably it's that economy, the parallel economy that is running without the tax.
Like India, we share everyone in the United States shares a hatred for British oppression. And I forget how, I don't know if this will be on topic, but the British had a very terrible rule of India, I think, from my study of history. And similarly, they really screwed up the United States. And so we fought, you all fought a war and we fought a war over that. And we both gained our freedom from the British. Our war in the United States was primarily, and I think you could say this, was around economic exploitation and around onerous taxation. And I think that that's really important to remember, because some people are not students of history. So why is there a pushback? Well, I mean, I'm probably on the far end of things, but I don't like taxes. I don't like taxation, and yeah.
Okay, so I'm probably hitting a different string or a different note here. So should I get back on topic of the day itself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're still on topic that banks, every dollar that goes through a bank is recorded and tracked, right?
Yeah.
And banks interface with the government. It's a highly regulated institution across the world. Why is it so regulated? Well, governments have decided that it's so crucial to the economy, and the ability to take other people's money and give it to other people is, it could be abused. You need trust in this institution that's taking one person's money and giving it to someone else. That's fundamentally what banks are doing. And hopefully they're getting that money back and giving it back to this person. But it could easily be, banking could be theft. Why is it not theft? Well, it's not theft because when you go to the bank, you get your money back. If you don't get your money back, then banking is theft.
That's right. So security has a lot of role to play here, right? Banking intelligence and security systems. So accordingly, we'll have that going into different banks and the data transfer that is done. On the topic itself, so this year, that is today, 4th of December, it's today, right? National Day of Banks. So the theme today, this time that the UN decided was to achieve sustainable development goals and improve the global financial architecture. Now, I don't know why they choose such long themes, but then it always makes sense. It's always surrounding sustainable development and the general architecture that needs to improve. But if there's something that you'd want to improve in the global financial architecture, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, I think it would be disclosure and transparency.
That's noble, right?
So it's a very simple thing, but I think that trust increases when information increases.
That's right.
And we live in an environment where we should be able to digest that information. And that's what we're focused on at Visbanking. We're focused on bringing more transparency, even in the United States where there's so much information available. It's often available in a form that's not very easy to digest.
Right.
So instead of reading hundreds of pages of tabular information, we show it in one picture, one graph, one line chart, one bar graph.
Right.
Really, really important globally. Let's increase the disclosure and transparency. You should, if you're going to give your money to a bank, you should know everything that's possible to be known about that bank.
That is correct.
Some of them might be afraid, because if you knew everything about that bank, you wouldn't go to that bank and give your money.
There's a lot of risk that the banks take, right, with every loan that is given out. So, yeah.
But on the other hand, they have the privilege of making money with other people's money. So the banks are able to lend that money out and make money. But none of that money, I mean, some of that money is the investors of the banks, but most of that money is someone else that just gave it to you to hold on to for safekeeping, maybe to pay some interest on. So it's a wonderful business, but there has to be trust.
That's right. I mean, I keep reading that is the fundamental way in which money is created out of thin air. So
in terms of money creation and like how money multiplies through the system,
yeah.
I would say that money is, I guess we're getting into macroeconomics here, but money is a representation, and the creation of money with a big M, big money, is a representation of, in a store of wealth. How's that wealth created? That wealth is created when Aditya works hard at his job, or when a farmer goes and plants a seed and brings something out, or when someone mines some metal and makes a bridge and sells a bridge, or whatever. That's how money is created, is actually from human productivity.
That's right.
And
that was the fundamental. I'm forgetting the book. So that's where it comes from. Human labor is the
Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations.
right.
Or
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the root of all money.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, right? Like that we are productive as human beings.
Yep. So I'll ask you the last question. I mean, it's usually my first question that I put out, but did you know about the International Day of Bank before I asked you for the podcast?
That's hilarious. I did not. I'm leading this bank startup, but let's just say as your life, it probably is. My life is very busy with 4 children and lots going on, and running a startup. And I wish I could say that I turn on the news and they tell me that it's the UN's Day of Banking, but I had no idea. I bet most of your I don't know, maybe some of your audience was familiar with it, but I don't spend my days reading the UN's declarations.
And not everybody does that. So, and what was your first impression at what would the day be about? I mean, other than just banks.
In terms of what the day would be, like the International Day of Banking, or
what did you expect that people would do on such a day?
Oh, I don't know. Probably just do what they've always done. Just create more money by being productive citizens of the world. And and probably, here we are in the United States. It's a Monday. I guess it's probably almost Tuesday.
Still Monday. We still have
still Monday, barely for you. But on a Monday, there's probably not people's paychecks are not being deposited in the banks. So I don't know, maybe bank deposits are going down today. People are spending more money from their bank.
So thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Aditya.
To the audience, I would say this was another great show of What's the Day. And if you have any comments on how the show was, or if you have any suggestions, or if you want a specific day to be covered on the next show itself, you just drop it down in the comments and we'll get back to you on the next episode of What's the Day. Thank you.